Good afternoon, everybody. And like Bibi mentioned, I'm actually Vinolia, and I'm the HR Chief People Officer for Adcorp. I would just like to go through a couple of slides with you and fundamentally share some case study that I've actually done. It was part of a master's research program, and it touches directly to the impact of technology within the workplace and the role HR should play. And part of that is engaging employee experience and what do you need to do as an HR fraternity. From a case study perspective, the research topic was strategic HR responses to anticipated digital disruption. Some of the key ideas was the future of work, artificial intelligence. It looks at the fourth industrial revolution. It looks at automation. It looks at human resources strategies and some of the things that you should consider. Looking at the process, the methodology was a qualitative exploratory research study using a Delphi technique. We had about 35 executives that participated that were either in an HR role with digital disruptors or CEOs of organizations and shared their view in the research. There were 3 rounds of data that was used to collect the information and insights of participants, and these were structured questionnaires. After each round, questionnaires were delivered for or designed for round 2 and round 3. The data collected was then analyzed using thematic analysis, and the key findings of the research, and I don't have time to go into it today because I only have 15 minutes, so just at a high level, just to get you to think about some things, is that the key findings is that there would be 8 areas in human resources which will be highly impacted by automation and digitalization in the next 3 to 5 years. And as HR professionals within the organization, you need to look or prioritize 6 areas in order to remain relevant and be impactful. So at a very, very high level, what are these? So the highly impacted areas by digitalization in the South African market that we anticipate in the 3 to 5 years, in order of relevance, the first we see is learning and development. It is the number 1 area that will be impacted by automation. And some of that my colleague Ursula will talk to in general around what we could expect in terms of innovation and learning. And from this perspective is that it is not about structured learning, it's about learning anywhere, but more importantly, it's about changing the way people learn. It's unlearning to relearn was the key theme that came out. Because at the past we've learned how to rote learn, etc. And it speaks about critical areas that will be impacted in terms of skill sets and competencies. And the World Economic Forum also says it will be areas like critical thinking. It will be areas like creative thinking, problem solving. And those are becoming the key learning areas. How do you train people on these competencies? Because they will be continuously exposed to change. Work structures will be different. Technology allows us to be disparate in terms of geographies and work groups. And also your work structures are now going to be robotically automated with humans. And how do you create work and team structures in that perspective? Talks about the automation of various HR tasks in terms of transactional elements being completely automated. And how do you use your HR capability to bring more human element or human-centered approach into your strategy? There's data analysis in terms of in HR, you would need to have a whole lot of capability around data and analytics. And some of that Lerato will touch in as she presents. Recruitment will be fundamentally disrupted. It's quite interesting where it says you might have a bot that will give you your candidates, but you will need a human to convince them to choose your organization as opposed to others on the table. And the human-centered element is where we need to start figuring it out in terms of let's not compete, but how do we complement automation? What are the human-centered skills we need to build, and how do we build that almost immediately? Performance management will change because now you have a process of 10 steps and you literally have a bot doing 5 out of that 10 and humans doing the other 5. And when the process at large or in its entirety fails, who do you hold accountable? And so the way you do performance management needs to change. Reward and recognition, and also there's an increased social inclusion in terms of what we are doing. We then look at 6 priorities for HR teams. As an HR team, what do you need to do in the looming disruption? It's about developing skills amongst employees and yourselves. You need to understand your organization strategy and what skills do you need for the future and how do you allow or build those skills in your employee to survive. It's also coping and change management skills. You got to manage and lead the change transformation journey as HR. So in order for you to do that, you must be comfortable with what's about to happen in your world, in the workplace. You got to become more customer-centric, both internally and externally. You also need to understand business and get a greater sense of business acumen. You need to change your operating models and become relevant for the future of work. Our way we structure HR and deliver is no longer relevant. You got to understand and embrace technology. Don't fear it. So go in there, be bold, get to understand what it means, what it does. And very importantly, you got to develop the ability to structure and interpret data more meaningfully in terms of what does it mean for my business, for now and for the future. Lastly, HR teams can effectively support these areas by building the right skills and capabilities within your own teams, coming together as a profession, because you have some organizations more mature than others. Their HR teams may have had this experience. How do we share our learning experience and capabilities to help each other navigate this unknown environment of technology and its disruption? And lastly, support and guide our organizations effectively and credibly, hold the conversations at a C-suite level, and make sure that your input is taken into decision making. Just lastly, I would the thesis actually showed some key areas, and this is a model that came out of it, is that HR, from a strategy point of view, you need to ask yourself, what is your short-term focus? What is your long-term focus? You got to have an internal and an external focus. And some of the key elements that come out of it is that, from a short-term external focus, you got to start engaging. If you are a union-based environment or employees, what does technology and disruption mean in your world? You got to collaborate more with the HR profession at large. You got to conduct research in your space, not formal research, but have an inquiring mind. And you also have to build the skills of your employee base. Internally focused, you got to automate your HR process where possible and allow your skill sets to be used in other areas that you're not getting to that are actually more strategically inclined. You got to manage the change and lead the transformation. It becomes utmost critical for HR, not to shy away, but lead those areas. On a long-term focus that looks at a 3 to 5 year, externally, HR should start engaging with academic institutions around building the right skill sets that we need, and also influencing and sitting on advisory panels around the skills your business might need, whether it be data analytics, whether it might be agile development, whether it might be artificial intelligence. But you got to start getting actively involved in influencing a bigger sphere, and you got to engage with other HR employees outside your workplace. On an internal perspective, you got to look at creating hybrid teams of machine and man. All your HR practices should start taking this into account, and very importantly, create highly personalized and individualized employee experiences within your workplace. And so that was quite a lot to get through and to speak through, but there's a lot of substance and more explanations, and Adcorp hopes to, in the next 2 to 3 months, because we're busy moving location, is to host some breakfast or some sessions where we will unpack this in more detail with clients and other HR professionals to understand what are the enabling factors behind some of these findings. So I'm going to hand over to Ursula, who's going to do the next 15 minutes.
Sure. I don't know. Thank you. Can you hear me fine? Right, I just want to ask the audience, I'm covering the topic, obviously, if we take some words, catalyzing, engagement, learning, innovation, it's a whole lot of words. I just want to ask you, and let's put you at the center of this conversation now, and I'll just share some of the experiences that we're starting to see with our clients from a learning and a development point of view, and that's in the artisan space, higher education, the learnership space, disability. So we're starting to gather all of this information about what do these things actually mean for us. And I want to ask you a question. How many hours do you think we should be spending a week on learning and development for ourselves? An idea? How many hours? 8 to 10? Come in? 10 hours? 4 to 5? How many hours do you think we're spending? They say we spend probably less than 1%. And actually, if you're interested in this learning and development and future jobs and all of those kind of things, there's a wonderful book that's out, is The Expertise Economy by David Blake from Degreed and Kelly Palmer, I think it is. And they make reference to the fact that now we should all be spending 5 to 10 hours a week learning. And so one of the things I want to maybe also just use the opportunity to demystify is all this romanticism around, future of jobs and learning and development. And I just really want to centralize it and bring it a little bit closer to us. And I think one of the most important things we need to start to look at from an engagement point of view, from catalyzing, and like I say, let's put us in the center, is how are we taking control of our own careers, and how are we taking control out of our own learning journeys. So one of the things, and I'll share a story, we're busy working on a piece of work around building some digital transformational skills for one of the banks. And in a particular case study, what we were exposed to is that the projected technical skills that they had projected for 3 years were the wrong skills. So I think one of the things that's critical for us in terms of as we start to look at the future, and obviously as we start to crystallize it for ourselves and taking control of our own career development, is what does it actually mean for us in terms of what our own personalized curriculums are. So we know we're moving away from our job descriptions, but really what is it that we need to start to do for ourselves? Because we're seeing the shelf life of skills obviously about 2 to 3 years. In fact, it's probably less. And I mean, if we just take the banking institution just as a point of reference in terms of what organizations think they're going to be referencing from a projected skill perspective, we're not getting it right. So when we look at catalyzing learning, fourth industrial revolution, the future, I think what we have to internalize around the fourth industrial revolution and learning for ourselves is how are we taking control of the learning, and how are we taking control of our own development paths. And then we move that into our working environments. And one of the biggest things that we are missing in terms of as we start to construct this is the environments that we then put our learners back into once we've exposed them to a new way of learning, a whole lot of new, different skill sets that we want them to be exposed to. So the environments that we're now also finding are absolutely critical, and there's a huge dependency, obviously, on this learning journey, the things that we're starting to teach people, the skill sets that are starting to materialize. If we put our people back into environments that are not conducive to this newness that we've internalized and obviously that we've identified for our different organizations, we're going to get it completely wrong. In fact, before we've even started. So what we've also picked up is from physical environments, that's particularly absolutely critical. If we start to look at how leadership is obviously impacting the learning journeys of people, how we are providing those safe environments, how we are providing environments that are obviously conducive to the learning that needs to take place. So when we start to unpack, what do we have to do from a learning and development point of view, I think the best starting point is certainly from ourselves and to start with us. Because, if we had to critically unpack that, I can tell you being overwhelmed employees in our organizations is we're not necessarily spending 5 to 10 hours now a week on our learning and development. But as we start to look at this in our organizations, like I say, what does the personalized journeys of everybody start to look like? How do we put them into environments that are conducive to the success and the continuous change that we're needing to see? And ironically as well, what we're seeing is, the development of technical skills, absolutely critical. But what we're also learning is the learnership or the learning ownership and the personal mastery and me owning my journey, and hence why it's important for us to own our career paths. And what we have to do is because that is becoming an absolute critical success factor. So what we're finding is that more and more, as we've heard in previous sessions, the human and the personal attributes that go around the human are absolutely, being heightened more so than the technical skills, because those are going to continuously change. So I'd like to just say, just start to think about, fourth industrial revolution and your own personalized learning journeys, because also from that will obviously impact your different environments of your respective workplaces. But at the heart of our learning, let's also look at the individual, of where we can put ownership. Let's look at personal skills. Let's look at the technical skills. Let's look at leadership. Let's look at the environment that we obviously put ourselves and obviously our learners into. And let's then start to be able to be agile, obviously from a learning and a development perspective, and how we start to really ensure that the environments that we have now from an L&D perspective are very much conducive to the future jobs, future world of work, and obviously the future productivity that we require in our different organizations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I didn't set it up so that I go last, but the benefit is that I can just stand here and go ditto the whole time. Because my colleague covered quite a lot. And I think for me what's important, just from a contemporary HR perspective, even before we get to the tech and the trends, et cetera, I always like to start my conversations by saying, let's go back to definitions, right? What is contemporary? What is HR even within context right now? Of all the things that we've been hearing, we're talking about kind of the future, and the future is no longer what it used to be. It's probably one of my favorite sayings right now, et cetera, et cetera. Then we keep hearing about all this technology. The machines are coming, the machines are coming. Well, the machines have been around for a long time. We're still here. The machines need us to press the button. When they start pressing their own buttons, that's when we'll start to worry, but we're still fine for now, right? So every single thing that we hear about, I think from a context perspective, you get lost in it because there's a sea of information. You hear about artificial intelligence, you hear about machine learning, robotic process automation, etc. And then as an employee, you're saying, well, where is my future in all of this? As an employer, you're saying, how can I leverage some of those things to be able to yield, triple, quadruple, bottom line? And then we talk past each other, right? Vinolia spoke about the levels of work and how companies are structured and how all of that needs to change. As an employee, your voice has become 3-4 times more powerful because you're at the coalface of some of these changes. If HR think they can sit in a quiet corner and build these policies and procedures for us, they've got another thing coming, because they'll turn around and it'll just be their bots, because we'll be gone. Because we can. It's really simple. So you hear all of these fads, AI, et cetera, et cetera. What does it mean to you, for you? Should you be worrying? Fourth industrial revolution, what does that mean? Internet of things. Where we have a country with data issues, are we panicking yet? But on the real though, if we look at some of the things that have been happening, I almost want to challenge you that you've been living in the fourth industrial revolution for a while. And you've not panicked. Why? Because the marketers hadn't gotten hold of 4IR. But now that they have it, now we need to respond quite quickly because we're going to be under pressure. I come from analytics, and really the journey of my story is quite a weird one, but I'm an IT girl through and through, come from analytics, and here I am sitting in a workplace solutions organization talking about HR, human capital, depending on the client, depending on how woke they are. And I'm saying, I'm just a technologist. When was the last time a technologist could say something like that? Because I'm not. From where I sit, from an analytics perspective, I'm the one who's saying workplace skills of the future are going to look fundamentally different. How are we going to start testing for that in our recruitment processes? If you give me a pile of 20 CVs, I promise you by CV number 4, I will have found the right person. Not because it's the right person, because I'll be tired. No, I'll be tired. So technology plays a role. How we engage, how we get assessed for competence. Remember, interviews are bi-directional. You're not sitting there to be assessed by yourself. You're sitting there assessing this organization, whether or not the fit happens that way as well. And I mean, again, they're much more woke people. They're moving away from culture fit and they're talking about culture add, right? Because why would I want 10 more of me? I would, but, you know. But literally, have we forgotten that other industries have gone through major meltdowns? All we're saying is that no industry is safe from technology. But all the other industries have gone through their ways. Let's just learn. I have a very, very wise grandmother who said to me, Lerato, make brand new mistakes. Don't make the mistakes that other people have made. Why? Because you can learn from it. It's there. If anyone in my team tries something new and they fail dismally and it's something that we've never documented, I'm buying them pizza and beer. They can have the pizza, the beer's for me. But really, it's about being able to start to tap into something different as leaders. Now, it's not about the skills that we need to have. It's about the courage that we need to have to make those kind of decisions. The person that's going to recommend a fully outsourced recruitment process outsourcing their business is going to be talking to me because that's the business of Talent Crew. But the courage to be able to say, given where we are now and where our strategy needs to see us, we're never going to make it with what we have on hand. That is something we don't talk about quite a lot. And we shift, we run to technology, and I want to run to technology because that's my home. But I always want to draw it back and say, bring the technology in and it's got nowhere to land because the organization, from a strategy perspective, is not ready. We read about it. Well, the worst thing that happens is execs. They go on aeroplanes, they read the magazines, they come back and tell us what to implement. Right? I read about, therefore we must. That's how you recognize it. It was read in a Sawubona magazine, don't worry. It wasn't Forrester or Google or anything like that. Sawubona magazine. Right? But really, what that means for us is that we must be able to have a voice. We read. We're learning from all sorts of different places. We're part of meetups, physical and technology meetups. We have access to so much, never before. In fact, our fear should be driven from the amount of ubiquitous information that we have right in our very pockets. So where do you start to hide if you make an incorrect decision? Well, you don't. Because making the decision and making the decision right are two separate parts of the same process. So technology, more than ever, if implemented on shaky foundation, is going to help you make mistakes faster. Don't do it. Take the time out to figure out you're driven by strategy. Employer and employee alike, if there's no alignment, I'm going to sit at my desk using my 5 to 10 hours, learning a skill that's going to migrate me out of that business. Make sure that there's synergy. But you're never going to know what's sitting in my head if I keep hiding it. So make the environment conducive enough for me to be able to have those kind of conversations. Make the environment conducive enough for me not to make a mistake, and that mistake must become my unique identifier for the rest of my career in that business. How often do you walk into a business and say, who's that guy? Oh, that's the guy that tanked that project. No, that's not who that guy is. That's the guy who taught you how not to do it. But I don't know what it is with organizations. It's almost as if we stop being human as soon as we get to work. Right? And now we want to have this massive reliance on technology. I'm saying, whoa, it is there. It is readily available. And it's becoming more and more accessible without the need for IT people, right? Strategies, we go cloud first, we go codeless app, we do all sorts of things which are really amazing. And you don't need IT until you break it. And once you've broken it, IT must know where you were at the time of creating it, mentally and otherwise. Because you can work from absolutely anywhere on the planet. You can. Your policies probably say that. They probably support that. But dare you not be in the office? Huh? Investec has implemented that whole unlimited leave thing. Huh? That's wonderful. That's wonderful. But Lerato doesn't come to work 2 days a week, every week, Lerato's never going to get promoted. Why? Because the human is experiencing this thing in a particular way. So it doesn't matter, actually. That's the crux of what I'm trying to say. It doesn't matter what technology you're looking at. If it's got nowhere to sit, you'll have nowhere to hide. Yesterday's problems are not going to be sorted out with, well, when solving now for yesterday's problems. That's moot. If you wanted to get transportation today, you just go and get a car. You don't start with the horse-drawn carriage. So that's the message that technology gives us right now. So on your journey, whatever that digital transformation journey looks like, digitalization is a valid step. Stop doing things on paper. That's okay. That's part of a digital transformation journey. Don't be bullied by the people that want Internet of Things so that your fridge must place the order of the groceries. Don't be bullied. You must absolutely be governed by strategy, and you must not be devoid of your organizational appetite for such. We can change it, employers and employees alike. Understanding contemporary HR and the tech related to it always will boil down to the objectives that the organization has for itself in the short term, as well as the medium term. That's as far as I'll go, medium term. Right? Because remember what I said up front, the future is no longer what we thought it was. So as organizations, do we have even the foresight to speak about 3 to 5 years? 5 years ago, somebody comes to you, they say they are a social media manager. Did you not have a laugh? What is that? Is that a job? 5 years from now, we're going to have people who are building organs. Organ creators. Why? Because they're just going to figure out what material to put into those 3D printers to be able to print it. So let's chuckle now before the time comes, and then we have to take those people seriously and call them specialists, and you know what I mean? So it's about being able to open those things. It's very rare that I stand up and, in a talk or whatever, and I give answers. I don't. I'm probing. I'm always asking the questions. I'm always saying, are you ready? Are you sure? Do you understand what you mean? But don't be trapped in that decision-making cycle. Make the decision. Then make the decision right. 2 separate things. 2 very separate things. You can't break it. You can, but, someone else knows how to fix it. But really, until we take our entire organizations for what and who they are, because they do have personalities, right? Vinolia spoke about the screening process and recruitment. You're probably being screened by a bot. But you have a decision to make. Is this the kind of company that I want to be a part of? Is this the kind of company that sounds completely different on paper than it does in the lived experience? Technology is not going to help us. If it's sitting on shaky ground, it's going to help us accelerate mistakes. So that's the end of the cautionary tale today for me. And I just want to encourage you, from every single place you're at, your vantage, the view that you have of your organization, of the industry, of the world, it is 100% unique. Much like everyone else's. We are all unique. But really, you need to trust that where you sit, you potentially have a view that somebody else absolutely needs to be able to flip over the switch and create the step change that we're looking for in organizations. But you must try it. You can't be afraid to learn. Do it, undo. Control Z. Very much possible we're living in the age of. So don't be afraid. The technology is there. I could have used this time to talk to you about the things that exist, but I let the manufacturers, I let the consultants, I let them do that, because where I spend my time is with customers who insist that they want these things. They get them in place, and then we spend months and months and months shutting down the robots because what we said they would do and what they're actually doing, completely divergent. So then I decided I'm going to use today to be the cautionary tale. That's what we do. We figure it out. We learn from other people that have charted the path. We learn from other industries. Part of the reason I'm successful in this particular industry is because I come from outside the industry. I wasn't afraid to start from the proverbial scratch. It's only proverbial because I'm using maybe 5.5 hours a week. I don't know. I'm there somewhere. Like, I've always been like a 50%. Don't laugh. It's higher than the 33%ers. I was the cutoff in my comp sci class. No, but the standard was quite high. But really, that's where we are. And that's what I need you to take back into your organizations. Those are the conversations that you need to drive, not only from an HR perspective, because HR goes into absolutely every space because it's about us. It's about us as employees. Even as executives, we absolutely have an employee number, trust. We're still employees ourselves. We're still navigating the path. Networked environments make it slightly easier, but we're still very much process-driven. Thank you very much for your time. It's been amazing.
Thank you, Lerato.